Well, good morning, everybody here. Good evening, I guess I should say, right? It's been a long day already. Well, thank you very much for attending, those of you who are here and those of you that are online. I don't have view to see if we have a lot of people online, but hopefully we do. This is a very important workshop when it comes to, District 1 specifically. Um, I've been affected, and I know there have been other individuals who have been directly affected when we get some serious rain. And they call them these 100-year storms, and I feel pretty good for being 300 years old because I've been through 3 of them in the last 3 or 4 years. So it's really good that you're attending, because the city has put in a lot of effort into correcting some of these challenges. Over the past year and a half, we've done a lot to try to alleviate some of the flooding that we've had in my district, District 1. Over by Southeast 8th. We've made sure that all of the lines are cleaned. We've repaired what needs to be repaired. We've looked at some design changes. There are some things that we can't change. There's a sewer pipe that bisects our storm drain, which causes an area that clogs. So, that's something we have to just keep clean, because we really can't change the design of that. The other challenge we have that, I've worked with the city with and talked about is we've all seen where water seems to get 3-4 feet high, and then within a half hour it's gone. And, we're trying to figure out, or at least I'm trying to figure out, well, why is that? And in talking with staff and talking with the consultants, what they've advised me is sometimes it's deals with the tide. A lot of times it just deals with where we're at in the system. There's a lot of water in front of ours that has to go first before ours goes. So it's kind of like, you're at a stoplight and you're waiting for that light to turn green. So that's another challenge that we have to overcome. And we're looking at designs in that. We're looking at, for the before the best case scenario to have, dirt on shovels is a year. So what are we going to do for that next year? Just kind of cross our fingers? No. We're doing a lot of preventative stuff. We've made sure that we've cut back on the speed bumps just in case that's, an impediment to the water flow. We've made sure that those drains behind the homes have been cleaned and that they're functional and they're fully operational. We've cleaned out the drains that are in front of the homes. So the city is doing everything we can from a preventative maintenance perspective to get this system as operational, as functionally operational as we can. But it is going to take a minimum of a year to really get, shovels, on the ground and to get some work to be done. So, I'll let Priscilla talk a little bit about that. We've got our consultants here. We've got, let me make sure, Mark Ellard, who is from GeoSync, and Alec Bagnagoff. I butchered that, and I apologize about that, Alec. But these are the 2 consultants who are in the process of designing the master plan. And that's what we have to do first, is we've got to design the master plan so that we can get the funds. The funds are readily available, and the city has been very proactive in making sure we get this master plan done so that we can get the funds that are available. And I'll let Priscilla talk a little bit about that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to step aside and let Ms. Sigilnik, I've worked 3 years on that last name. I finally got it right. So I'm going to let her take over, and then I'll be here for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Good evening. How are you? Good, how are you? Excellent. Thank you so much. Priscilla Sigilnik, so I'm the Director for Environmental Services. I just wanted to let you all know that tonight we're going to be taking you through a synopsis of our master plan. I'll warn you that the master plan itself is about a 1,000-page document. So we're not going to cover everything comprehensively tonight in that master plan document, but we're going to go over a few key things, which are, we've conducted a model of our overall existing system. We found where the deficiencies are in our system, and this helps guide our future improvements for the city. The other thing we want to discuss tonight is we received a FEMA grant, an FMA Advanced Assistance Grant for Southeast 8th Avenue, which is the area of interest for District 1. And we completed 30% documents for that district. That 30% document positions us to get additional funding through FEMA for construction. It also positions us to use ARP funds to fund improvements through the federal government. So these are strategic grants that we're going after to be able to fund improvements for Southeast 8th Avenue. Now, tonight we're here for District 1. We are doing this meeting every evening for tonight and tomorrow and Monday and Tuesday of next week. So we're doing this one night for each district. And the intent of that is to give you an opportunity here to voice your concerns specific to your neighborhoods and communities, and tonight specific to District 1. So that's why we want to hear from you tonight. Let you tell us specifically what your concerns are. We want to document all of that for the master plan. So you guys end up being a comprehensive element of our plan. This public outreach is documented in the overall master plan, and your comments get noted and added to the plan. So it becomes a matter of public record. So, please understand you're informing our decisions and you're leading our improvements. So these are community-led improvements and community-led input. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mark Ellard. Mark is here from Geosyntec. He's our primary consultant who's been working on the Stormwater Master Plan, and he's accompanied by Alec Bogdanoff. Did I get that right? With Brazaga, who's been helping us with the community outreach. So without further ado, I'll let Mark get started. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Priscilla. And as we mentioned, we're going to do an overview and talk in general, and there's going to be ample time for any questions to come later. But we're going to start out, and I'll let Alec go first, actually, and kind of give an overview or introduction to why we're here. And then I'll take over and get into some of the technical details of the master plan. Alec?
Thanks, Mark. There we go. So thank you all for coming tonight. First of all, the community input and engagement part of this is really important. Your feedback, as Priscilla said, informs the master plan, right? We take these comments, we look at them as part of the plan as a whole. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we did, what we've done so far, and ultimately where we are in the program. We're at the end. We are providing the results to the city, and these final comments will inform basically the final portions of the document. So on April 11th in 2018, the city passed an ordinance to create a stormwater management program and a utility fund. So this really provided a program and a basis for funding to upgrade the system. This is dedicated funding for the stormwater program, and this is a great step forward as you start thinking about what this community needs in terms of stormwater infrastructure and the challenges with a changing climate. So ultimately, you wanted to look at constructing, improving, and maintaining the stormwater system in the city, right? Where all of our communities across South Florida are about 50 to 70 years old. A lot of this infrastructure is original. And so thinking about upgrading it over time, this is an expensive endeavor. I will tell you, this is not just a unique thing for Deerfield. All of the communities across South Florida are at a point where they're spending money and time thinking about what's next for their system. And ultimately, a utility fee was established. This fee is funding this initiative. And so far, over $1 million in capital projects have done. So this stormwater system doesn't just take the water away from the roads, right? We have to think about what happens to that water as it goes out to where it's eventually going to be, which is the ocean. So we need to not only collect it, but it actually needs to treat the water as well. The treatment of stormwater can actually be very complex and expensive. Actually, kind of collecting it can be a fairly simple task, but again, making sure all that water is treated and the water quality doesn't interrupt our beautiful community is a challenge. Again, the age and diminished capacity. A lot of these pipes are smaller they were designed for a very different Deerfield than we've seen today. Again, public safety and health is really important, making sure that the areas, sometimes roadways do flood, but to the extent possible, we want to make sure that homes and businesses don't. And again, the city is actually a co-permittee on what's called an MS4 permit. So it's a technical term, but basically there are requirements in order to get this permit from the federal government under the Clean Water Act. And also there's the National Flood Insurance Program, which you guys are a part of through the community rating system, looking at ways we can reduce flood insurance by doing proactive things for the community. And ultimately thinking about how we prioritize benefits for the community. So where are we? The utility program was established. The program's funding personnel, equipment, materials, capital planning, and projects. And ultimately, this master plan was initiated in October of 2019. The initial master plan meetings were held in November of 2020. I see some familiar faces. And ultimately, the input that we received there helped inform some of the decisions in terms of prioritization. As we've noted, that they received a FEMA FMA, or a Flood Mitigation Assistance program. And so now we're receiving the final public input, completing the plan, and starting to think about how we seek additional grant funds. The state and federal government have a lot of money available right now. This is the perfect time to be finishing a Stormwater Master Plan, and ultimately, what are the programs that are needed? So today, we're going to briefly talk about what this plan is, what the tasks are. Then we're going to go into an overview of district-specific projects for District 1. We're going to learn more about next steps, and then, of course, we want to obtain your input. And then you have the consultants, city staff, and the commissioner here to have a conversation with you all. So to level set, stormwater systems, we just kind of want to level set on what it is in the definition of the Stormwater Master Plan. This is the primary system on the roadways and surrounding areas that's designed to move water from a rain event in an organized way. Ultimately, it's the series of drains and swales and even the canals that you see. A lot of the water here gets kind of put into the ground, but you also have a sophisticated flood control system that basically impacts you all because the water from the west flows east. And so all of the water is connected in terms of how it eventually flows out to sea. So the goals of this project, first of all, were flood management. We wanted to make sure that this community floods as little as it can for as little time as possible. So we want the least amount of water for the least amount of time in as many places as possible. And that's ultimately the goal. We say, okay, here are the thresholds for what's acceptable, and what do we need to do to get you to an acceptable level? The important thing is that we're not going to be able to say there's not water on roads all the time. This is Florida. We get very heavy rainstorms down here, but ultimately we want to make sure that when it does rain, that rain moves off the roadways and away from homes as quickly as possible. And again, we talked about water quality improvements. This is kind of a co-goal with flood management. You have to think about what the water quality is as it goes out to our beautiful ocean, intercoastal, and surrounding areas. What are the challenges that we were thinking about as part of this? Well, first, sea level rise. As we noted that the water goes out to sea, and as sea levels rise, it means that gravity system, the water can't just flow out as easily, right? If you have where the water goes covered by water, it's a lot harder to flow out. It's like putting your hand in, front of a faucet for a minute. That's kind of what's happening. And then once you let it go, the water can flow out to sea. So as our tides fluctuate, we have that challenge. Topography, we're fairly flat, which means that it takes a little bit longer for water to get where it's going. We get very heavy rainfall. Again, associated with sea level rise, we're seeing more tidal flooding. We have a significant amount of rainfall. We were thinking about flood protection, making sure that properties flood the least amount as possible. Land use. Ultimately, we have a community that's more developed than it used to be. So that impacts the stormwater system. And again, water quality, floodplains are part of this. Saltwater intrusion, making sure that we also protect our drinking water. This is a part of the overall equation. And then, of course, there are both state and federal regulation. So why does the city do a master plan? Well, ultimately, this is the guide for the city. This says, how do we spend money in a thoughtful and proactive way to reduce flooding and improve water quality as much as possible? We know we have aging coastal infrastructure, but again, we want to make sure that we reduce the magnitude, the impact, and the severity of flooding to the extent possible. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mark, who's going to talk about what a stormwater master plan is and a little bit more and go over the results of the plan.
Thank you, Alec. So we're going to shift and talk about, we talked about what it is, what's the goals. We're going to talk about the elements that make up this master plan. Again, what this was an opportunity to review the entire stormwater management system, flooding, water quality, other elements, and what's going to happen, the impacts that may be coming in the future. Look at both the inland structures, but also the coastal structures, those outfalls that go out to the intercoastal, the Hillsborough, or into the Broward Water Control District. Now we look at effects of things that are happening right now or in the past or right now, but also the future. If the projections of things changing in the future with sea level rise or other things come to fruition, that puts additional stress on the stormwater system. So a lot of this is taking a snapshot of what's going on now, preparing for the future, but developing strategies and programs and projects to move dirt and improve drainage that'll make the city more resilient for the future. And that's really getting the good sound bit of data on which to base this on to base the capital improvement. And we'll talk about what we recommend for projects and how much money that is. And you can see the significance of why it's important to get it right and have it on a solid foundation. So I'm going to step through the elements in a little bit more detail and just give you a sense of the types of information that we look at and evaluate. The flooding assessment is one of the critical needs, and that's what people see the most of. Right, flooding. Here's a couple pictures from last year, from portions of the city that became underwater. What do we do? And this is take an opportunity to compile complaint and flood complaint data from citizens like you, but from the city known problems as well. Look at where those hotspot areas or sore spot areas are with regard to flooding. Then we use analytical tools, some computer simulations and computer models to evaluate the hydrologic and hydraulic performance of the system. Part of that is to confirm flooding areas that may be then candidates for capital improvement projects, but also to do a general assessment of the system to also look for areas which maybe they're already operating okay today, but maybe down the road a little bit, maybe stressed. And that we do that through a process of running design storms. You heard the commissioner talk about 100-year storms that we've had a few of them, right, past years. But we look at drainage infrastructures designed by engineers to handle certain design storms. For example, the storm sewers that may be in front of your house, the swale systems are generally designed to a 10-year design storm, whereas municipal systems where habitable finished floor of structures, they generally want to stay out of a 100-year floodplain. So we talk about different storm events. We also have the opportunity to take those information and confirm the level of service of the system. And by level of service, I mean these things are designed to perform to a certain storm or certain level, and we can assess how well they do that throughout the city, the drainage infrastructure. So we confirm there's no problems, we identify potential problems, and again, to serve as the basis for capital improvement recommendations, which the 8th Avenue that we'll talk about in a little while is one of them. So there's a little bit about some of the data that we've compiled. This map on the left shows in the orange areas complaint data that we did. And this is from probably the last few years. Priscilla was able to provide us with where we got complaints. Some of this was from the public meetings we had last fall, some of these areas. So these areas throughout the city where there's been complaints, somebody called in, either seeing some flooding or some issues related to that. The purple areas, you see some purple lines in the city are some known flooding areas that the city deals with that are chronic, and they have to deal with quite a bit. So this is part of the getting that data together and understanding where some existing problems so we can target our assessment. Now, the map on the right is an important aspect of the action that we can base that on. That's the drainage infrastructure. Part of this project is mapping out where all the drainage systems are in the city. If you don't know where they are or don't have a good accounting for them, then it's hard to do a thorough assessment. So building on some great data that the city already had and mapped out for some of their public right-of-ways, we went and spent an opportunity to go through plans and construction as-built and fill in this information with what their drainage systems are throughout the city, covering all areas, because stormwater doesn't stop at a municipal or a jurisdiction or a property line. So we need to understand what's going on throughout the whole system. So these are two key pieces of information that provide the foundation for putting together this hydrological and hydraulic computer simulation. And again, what this does is looks at the design storms that serve the basis for the level of service system, run computer simulations to see how well things are performing. And these are the some of the storm sewers, the houses, the cross drains that connect the various waterways or ponds throughout the city, and importantly, those outfalls that drain things out to the coastal areas. Look at those, see how well they're performing. And what we do is provide a mapping counting like this. Now, this is a little hard to see, but there's red dots throughout the city here that indicate areas where there's a level of service deficiency. Now, what we've done is zoomed in here a little bit to District 1. And you can see an area that has a red dot is a system that may not be meeting its level of service. Now, that can mean anywhere from 6 inches of water stays outside of an inlet for an hour or half an hour or so, all the way up to feet of flooding that becomes a chronic issue. But this information taken together allows us to start pinpointing, looking at areas that may be consolidated for improvement. Now, flooding is one key component, but as Alec mentioned, water quality assessment is another one. There are some regulations on the books now, but mostly coming that will affect the way or the need for the city to to manage water quality of stormwater to a higher degree. As stormwater hits the ground, it picks up various pollutants, metals, oils, nutrients from the ground, and then just washes those into the drainage system. Now, you see a lot throughout the city ways that it's being treated already as stormwater pond. You see those in most new developments, and those are mechanisms which can treat stormwater, take out some of the pollutants before it makes its way to the receiving water, the intercoastal or Hillsborough, or south to the Broward Control District. So that's going to be important looking forward to be able to look at hotspots or, again, areas of the city where there might be excessive or higher pollutant loadings, and be able to kind of program projects and ideas for fixes moving forward in the future. So in addition to flooding water quality, that serves another element of identifying projects and programs for moving forward. We did a coastal resources assessment. This was focused primarily on the various outfalls throughout the city. And we did a conditions assessment from the boat to looking at, are these things working well? There's some example pictures here of what I would consider a good looking outfall, one kind of medium and one that's in kind of disrepair. It's important that these function correctly because the water is trying to get, through them out to the coast. So we looked at which ones may need to be addressed. Again, that would fall into a capital project improvement that may need to be programmed for the future of the master plan. Now, I will say one of the challenges with outfalls is the city does not always have the right of way or an easement where the outfall is. Some of them go through private property. So there's an additional challenge if there's problems with those that are going through private property. There's efforts to also be able to, secure the rights to be able to do some of the improvements. And that's particularly a challenge if there's a lot of other public or a private area trying to drain through those points. So again, this is another key element of the master plan. Now, another couple areas that we look in, the first one is a regulatory compliance review. Alec referred to, and Priscilla, some of the regulatory requirements that are given by the state or even local authorities to manage stormwater. One of them is the NPDES permit, which is a federal permit that's dictated through the state of Florida to manage your stormwater program. And it's not only just to make sure you know what your stormwater management system is, but that you're maintaining it and operating it properly. And there's metrics and requirements for doing that. Also, is an opportunity to look at local code, the comprehensive plan code and ordinances, land development code, look for opportunities for enhancements that the city can consider to manage stormwater better moving forward, knowing what we know through this master plan. There's a floodplain management system, the community ratings system, which was mentioned before, which is very important. It's the mechanism by which flood insurance discounts can be provided to citizens. And I will say the fact of doing this master plan is an important factor that can be considered in getting lower insurance rates. Again, these turn into less projects that turn dirt, but recommendations for enhancing the program. Likewise, one of the last big elements we look at is the operations and maintenance review. You saw how much drainage infrastructure is out there, and Priscilla and her staff are challenged with maintaining that, making sure it operates and having the resources, both personnel and equipment, to be able to do that. So their staff and operations not only pays for the employees, pays for the equipment, the street sweepers that you may see or may not see since they tend to go out at night. But here's a little table in here that just gives you a sense of there's, nearly 3,000 inlets. There's over 45,000 feet of exfiltration system pipe that's part of the city system that they have to maintain. So significant action. So recommendations for how the city may enhance their program of being able to operate and maintain the system are also included. So covered those main elements. There's some other minor elements, but what it does is culminates in what we call capital project recommendations. And this is kind of the take home of the master plan, pulling all the different elements that we looked at together and recommending what needs to happen moving forward and putting a price tag as part of the plan is understanding how much things are going to cost. And then so the city has an opportunity to start looking for funding for that. So this is what we have right now as far as our CIP listing, and what it has broken down there is a number of flooding projects, water, both projects that can go direct to a design level, for example, 8th Avenue. There's some flooding studies, some areas that were indicated some problems that may be occurring and may warrant looking into a little bit deeper before they get to an actual construction project. Some water quality projects, also some coastal resources projects, for example, looking at repairing some of those critical outfall deficiencies, all put together to provide a recommendation moving forward for a CIP. Now, as you can see, the text is a little small, but if you can see on the bottom, right now, this totals over $18 million. So this is not a insignificant amount of money to be able to address a lot of these problems moving forward. Now, as part of the capital project, the table is hard to see where these actually are occurring. So we provided this map that has dots of where these major capital projects are located. The blue ones are flooding related projects and the green dots are water quality related projects. As you can see, they're fairly well spread out throughout the city. And in fact, as you'd expect, many of the water quality ones are actually situated close to where outfalls are going to the Hillsborough or intercoastal. How that table on the previous slide breaks down per commission district is shown on the right. There's a breakdown by district, but then there's also some of the project recommendations that are actually a citywide benefit. So we total those separately. This is how one of the other things we do is we look at a planning schedule. The city's not going to spend the $18 million next year. They probably loved it if they had the money, but it has to be spread out over a period of time. And this, we look at a planning window of 10 years, which is shown on this table. What this allows us to spread out that money, prioritize projects moving forward of what needs to be spent, kind of set it out so that it's in an organized manner. Now, the other thing this benefits, the city is looking where money and expenditures may be prioritized. Having this established in a 10-year program also helps to look for external funding that may be available out there to help supplement the city's funds. I think when we're looking at the stormwater, to give you a sense of budget, when we're looking at the stormwater utility, I think the budget, it was about $2 million a year was brought in, but currently only about $400,000 a year can be earmarked for capital projects. So there's over this 10-year period, is a significant, ground to get some funding to address these needs. But having this plan, knowing what it is, allows the city to move forward in a smart manner to be able to look for ways to make a better program. Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. As was mentioned, the city got some funding from FEMA, Flood Mitigation Grant funding, to advance 4 key project areas in the city to take them to the next level. Master plan identifies projects, sets together that plan in motion, but then design and implementation of projects happens after. Well, this funding helped to advance 4 areas to go to a 30% preliminary design. That's essentially coming up with a solution that's appropriate for the particular areas. Now, the 4 areas here are shown by district. And the one of focus here tonight with Commission District 1 is the Southeast 8th Avenue. So that is being advanced beyond the rest of the projects in the master plan based on that external funding the city was very fortunate. So a little bit more on the 8th Avenue project. This is a map that shows the improvement concept for the area. As you can see in the middle, at the 8th Avenue, pretty much in the dead center of there. If you see this cursor moving around, we'll see if it does. So 8th Avenue, Southeast 8th Avenue here. There's the pipe behind the houses that was referred to earlier, which is really the outfall for the area. And I point that out because, as the commissioner mentioned, to this issue of this water has to wait and go a long ways to get to its outfall. From this back of the yard pipe, it goes to the north, but has to get its way over to the northeast across US 1 and to an outfall that's pretty far away. The small map here shows the path, and you may be aware of what it is. Here's US 1, and it heads out here. So there's a significant distance that this water has to travel to get out of there. So one of the constraints of this is just simply being able to try to be more efficient with the way things are draining in this area. Now, some of the concepts that were looked in the past and the city had looked in the past was, can you just make the outfall pipe bigger? Well, as you can imagine, that is quite a constraint for this long outfall path. And there's already very large pipes once it gets near the outfall. Is there things like injection wells or pump stations, but all these have some issues with the acquisition of right of way and tend to be cost prohibitive. There's the idea of, well, can we build some stormwater ponds, detention and retention ponds that you see in a lot of areas? Well, that would require buying up homes or buying up properties, which is also very expensive. So one of what we came up with this concept was this idea of, and actually I'll go to the next thing and it'll be a little bit. Yep. Right here? Yeah, it's 4th. And if you look at this next map, this is the same information, but instead of an aerial, this is topography, the land elevation. And this is some good detailed elevation data that we got for the project. And if I'll orient you to this map, the darker colors are higher in elevation, and the lower colors, for example, this blue right in the middle, is lower elevation. And as you can see, there's an obvious, what we term a bowl right along 8th Avenue. This just sits lower than the surrounding area, which again contributes to the fact that that's some of the worst flooding. Some of the areas are on the peripheral are also low, but then there's some other areas they're quite a bit higher. So the challenge here is that bowl. That's the place that wants to fill up and then wait its turn to get out the outfall and out to the northeast. So what we've come up with an alternative is the idea, well, if we can minimize what gets to that bowl, if we can spread out the drainage throughout the subdivision, the area more, then what that does is lessen the impact right in that area. So we proposed a number of more pipes, more inlets along some of the streets, kind of looping them, connecting them together, providing some exfiltration pipes, which is some infiltration pipes, to be able to kind of take the edge, so to speak, off on some of the flow that wants to get to the bowl where some of the inlets are, but be able to drain it, manage it better earlier on to kind of be able to spread out the timing of the flow so that it can more effectively, as it's waiting to go on the outfall, to cause less impact, and in many cases, hopefully reduce significantly the instance of flooding. So that's the concept as we have it right now, and as it's mentioned on the bottom of the slide, the current estimate is just under $2 million for that improvement. Now, and went through that real quick. We can spend time. If you have specific questions, we can go back to this or look at maps for other questions. But when we get through that overview of the master plan of the 8th Avenue project concept as we have it now. So finishing with the slides with the presentation, we'll just talk about the next steps. Next steps are finalize the master plan. We're at the tail end. We're going through this process of the public meetings here, getting the word back out to you all. And we'll have a final commission presentation after getting your input and providing a finalized master plan. We're going to cap things off at the end. So those are the next steps. Now, Again, like we did last fall, providing input is important. I mean, we're kind of at the tail end, but any time to give input into this is good. So I'd like to hear from you tonight, the Q&A or through some comments. There's also this information that can be viewed or ways to get, questions out after the fact to the city contacts and by phone. And I know I saw you writing down real quick or something. We have this information up here. So if you didn't get it down quick enough, then go ahead and ask later. There's also some resources that are included here on the city's website that you can click and find some fact sheets and just some information about the benefits of stormwater master planning. And with that, that's the presentation that we have, and we will go into Q&A. And Priscilla, how would you like to approach? Just open it right up, or?
If you would just raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll come around with the mic so we can capture you on the video. I did want to reiterate though that the presentation that you viewed tonight, we're going to make that available on our city website through the Environmental Services Department website. We also have a recording of tonight, so you can view it again later at your discretion, or tell your neighbors about it so they can see it. So that will be posted to our website as well. And all of these resources and contacts will be made available to you so you can get into contact with us. But tonight, if we could, we'd like to ask for your input, ask for your concerns and your questions. We can go much more into depth on any one of these slides. I know, it's very interesting to see the hydraulic model and to zoom into that. So Mark can bring that up on his computer and we can zoom in specifically to your home so you can see how you relate to the drainage in and around your home and the situation that's there. So any of those kind of questions that you want more information on and you want to see, we're available for you tonight to be able to go into that so you can see those details.
And we do also have Zoom going, so there's several people on there, so there may be some
Yes.
questions coming
If
in
you
there.
have a question for Zoom,
get-
please raise your
You
hand.
get first preference, since you're live in person.
On Zoom, and we will unmute you so you can ask your questions. Okay.
Okay, but we have gentlemen in the audience here. Go ahead.
How you doing? Thomas Nolan, 406 Southeast 8th Avenue. I really like your presentation. I think you guys did a heck of a job. I think it's very important that if the city's gonna be spending this much money and they're looking at the future 10 years, 15 years down the road, that you guys are doing a study like this. We're going outside, we're getting the experts, and I really appreciate that. I think it's important too, though. You're doing a stormwater plan. You got, companies trying to get public outreach. You're having community meetings. I think what we're missing is we have advisory boards for everything. We got fishing advisory boards. We don't have a stormwater advisory board. I think it'd be smart if this city forefront for 10 years down the road, this is gonna be a 10-year project. We get in ground level with all of your districts or district specific. You have a group of people that live in all the different problem areas and you formulate your own advisory board. So sometimes it's hard to get information from people, but if you have these regular meetings or boards after major floods or after our natural disasters that we have, they're going to be your boots on the ground that can get you that information. Just a thought when you guys are doing this. I know you're trying to get a lot of input from the city. So one thing that came to mind, I think too, is you're trying to find ways to solve the problem. And a lot of times, people are afraid to come to these meetings and voice their opinion because they feel like no one's going to listen. And I think you guys did a great presentation that you're looking for public input, because if you're not here, staking where your flooding is happening, the city might not know about it. So I think it's very important that the way you guys presented was very well, and you're asking for input. So thank you.
What I want to just tail end on that.
Commissioner, can you use the microphone?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you-
I just want to dovetail onto that. One of the reasons, or the reason Southeast 8th Avenue is at the forefront is because the residents came out. There could be other areas in District 1 that they're just like I was 3 years ago, just, oh, well, it's going to flood again. I just make sure the house doesn't flood. So I appreciate, you coming out. I appreciate the residents of Southeast 8th Avenue being involved in this process and keeping that area on the forefront, because if it's not for the residents, if my house didn't flood, I wouldn't have ran for commissioner. So again, keeping it on the forefront by the residents is what's going to get your area and the rest of the city, where we need it to be. So I want to thank you for being here. And for those of you online, I also want to thank you for attending.
Good. Next, do we want to go stay here? Yeah, go ahead.
Doesn't matter. Hi, everyone. My name is Nada. I'm actually a new resident here in Deerfield, so super excited. Thank you so much for the presentation and for the invite to the meeting. I look forward to becoming more involved with the city and various initiatives. So one of the first things that I noticed when I moved here was the flooding of the streets. And when I look at an aerial view of the city of Deerfield, it doesn't surprise me at all, though, because all you see is concrete. It's either homes or roads. There are very few green areas, very few trees, very few swales and drainage ponds. So to me, I mean, this is fantastic as a resident, as a taxpayer, to know that the city is doing everything it can to fix the problem when it happens. It's like there's a flood, there's storm water, get it out as fast as possible. I would love to see the community take care of the prevention. So to me, it's like part A and part B. The prevention is a huge part of it too. And maybe if there is a community initiative or something, I mean, I'm happy to do whatever I can to spread the word in my little world. But it's like building yards that can retain that stormwater before it even hits the streets. If it's just lawns, the lawn isn't going to retain anything. If anything, it contributes to the storm water runoff problem. It flushes nutrients into the water. We're so close to the coast that I feel like it's my responsibility, even more so than somebody living out west, to make sure I'm not flushing fertilizers and nutrients into the water that create the algae bloom and red tides and all sorts of environmental issues. So if there's any way to kind of add the element of either creating a social campaign or something or an incentivize the community. So every resident who has space, who has that small green area that is so precious in the city of Deerfield, even HOA communities, any communities. I mean, I live off of Southeast 6th Avenue. There is no HOA, but if people just knew how much power they have to not only fix the problem, but prevent it, even if it's a little mitigation that they can do to just create less of the problem that they're complaining about. So we're all complaining about flooded streets, but we also as a community have the responsibility and we have the power to implement so many little changes to create Florida-friendly landscaping yards that retain stormwater, rain gardens, bioswales, and landscape in an appropriate way, fertilize appropriately, so we're not creating dumping more nutrients and pesticides and all that. We can do so much. And so I love this. This gets me really excited. I'm also like, I would love to be involved in any initiative that the city has to get the residents involved in solving this problem.
Yeah, a few things. When you're talking about education and educating the public, that's actually a requirement of that NPDES permit that comes out from the state to the city. There's elements of best management practices that the city has to engage that involve education. And in fact, I apologize, going back here, if you can see, well, if you can squint a little bit, there's actually kind of right down in here, we have an allotment for educational programs, like an annual allotment to help with that, exact issue of trying to get the word out and get folks smart. Florida funny landscaping is a big thing. So there's that. But there's also, when you mention bioswales and rain gardens and green infrastructure, those are effective ways to manage stormwater. So as part of the regulatory review of the city code and comp plan, those are some of the elements we look with. Those are becoming more popular as effective ways to help take the edge off of stormwater, management and really help. And so there's recommendations to look into the code, make sure there's not anything that inhibits the application of those type of technologies as they come through. And even you mentioned swales. We have one of the studies that we did identify, and again, it's kind of down on the list here, swale improvement program. That's actually studied to look. And I've lived in Florida all my life, and one of the challenges they have is there's the old Florida and there's new Florida. Old Florida was no curb and gutter. It was ditches and swales. And as you drove along, and ditches and swales, and you expected some water to be in them a little bit. I mean, for a reasonable amount of time, because there are issues. But what happens a lot is even in some of the subdivisions where swales used to be in the front yards, and over time it just happens, it accumulates for mowing lawns, and not from any direct practice, but they kind of fill in over 15, 20 years. And as you see, a lot of the areas, that's where trees are planted because it looks nice and things. But some areas we see in a lot of cities, not just Deerfield, where just the benefit of having a swale, a little bit of swale in a lot of these areas that don't have the curb and gutter can be helpful in those type of areas. So I'm glad you brought that up, because there are some things programmed in the budget that are promote or that'll look into those things.
I have a caller. Doris, if you could join us, can you?
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you again for your time. And this is a great, resource. I recently moved to the Cove. My address is 458 Southeast 17th Terrace. And I moved here about over a year ago. And I noticed that whenever it rains, all of the flooding from the street comes down into my driveway and literally floods my garage, inside my garage. And I looked around to see where the closest storm drain is, and it's maybe about 5 or 6 houses down the street. So there's only in my entire street one small storm drain all the way on the end of the street. So I wanted to see, is there a way to get another storm drain, to request the city take a good look at my street specifically, Southeast 17th Terrace, to try to put another storm drain somewhere on this side of the street to stop that from happening.
We'll definitely evaluate it. We'll have to get your address again and take a look at the area and see, see where the low points are and where the water wants to go. But these kinds of concerns, we take down the addresses, we add it to our list of complaints, so that we can programmatically, work these into the overall scheme. So that's the whole purpose of the master plan, is to take on all of these concerns in these areas and to prioritize it based on the greatest public benefit. But yes, we'll definitely add your concern to the list of our flooding areas, so we can look into areas to, ways to mitigate it.
Okay, do I need to contact anyone specifically, or how do I put my address on the list?
Yeah, if you can put your email in the chat box, we'll capture that information.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have one right here. Go ahead, John.
Hi, I'm Sandy Koyman, recent move here to Deerfield. I have about 8 weeks of experience owning property in Deerfield, so take 8 weeks, yes. Yeah. I live at 602 Southeast 8th Avenue. I was just wondering, you put up the spreadsheet with the all the costs and that kind of thing, and you mentioned that the existing stormwater fund that 400 K is allocated to capital projects. And we're going to spend $2 million a year. Is the plan to make up the rest of that through grants and state funding and all that kind of thing?
That's the hope, yes, sir.
Okay. And then the other question I had is I want to second the comments about the green infrastructure and how important that is. And is there sort of an active component to the plan that is going to proactively encourage property owners to participate in those kinds of activities?
I think I mentioned one of the elements, the recommendation to do a swale study is one element of that. There's also some recommendations for the educational programs I mentioned, even things such as looking at enhanced street sweeping, which is a way to get sediments and nutrients and pollutants, out of the system before they get in the receiving waters. So those are looked into. So the ability to do those type of studies and focus on those areas can be facilitated by the master plan. So, and as I mentioned, we did some focus when we're doing the regulatory review on looking for ways that certainly that the code wouldn't inhibit doing those things, but also promoting them. There's big efforts, I would say, even countywide and Florida-wide to look at some of those more green infrastructure type of solutions. I will say that traditionally they've been a little bit of a challenge because the paradigm in Florida has been to deal with stormwater by building big ponds and large underground storage systems, and the ability to do a lot of smaller things distributed around the area as opposed to just having the big hole in the ground to hold things has caught on more in recent years. And there are a lot of folks who are adopting and trying to promote those type of technologies.
We are adopting the Stormwater Master Plan into our comprehensive plan as well. So with redevelopment, that's what can guide some of these green infrastructure initiatives. And so that's become a component of our comprehensive plan, is really to push that on development as development comes into the city or is interested in building in the city. More and more, we're asking for that green infrastructure to be built as part of that redevelopment process. So this master plan not only feeds into what our immediate needs are and identifying it, but it feeds into our redevelopment as a city and planning in the future. So the landscape code. Well, yes, we have a number of different initiatives. If you go to our website, you can see what what we've put together as far as Florida friendly landscaping practices. And so I encourage you to visit our website to see that. It's under planning and building services. But with redevelopment, yes, we require that they meet a municipal code on redevelopment, and we're building into our comprehensive plan that the comprehensive plan is the basis of all the redevelopment that occurs. We're building into that these initiatives for green infrastructure with redevelopment. So we are going to be pushing that much more moving forward. And that really does treat water quality. We talk about the first flush, which is the first inch of rainfall is what carries most of the pollutants. So we look at taking that first inch of rainfall, treating that before it gets into the system and outfalls to our waterways. I'm going to take a call from one of our Zoom participants. Gregory Jones.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Greg Jones. I live at 325 Southeast 8th Avenue. So I just had a quick question. When you guys put that topography map up there, I noticed that basically the entire neighborhood drains to our street. Besides tearing up the roads and putting bigger pipes or culverts or whatever you have to do, will that fix the problem? Because if everything drains into our street, once those bigger pipes fill up, are they going to be pumped somewhere else, or is this just going to be a ongoing issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. And let me clarify a little bit. And I put the map back up. What we're showing there is new pipes, but what we're proposing is exfiltration pipes, which are basically perforated pipes that go in the ground and let a lot of that stormwater infiltrate where it enters the stormwater system. So it's certainly not intended to just put more pipes that just drain right to the low area. What that, with the exfiltration, that percolation that spreads it out, allows that infiltration to happen over a large area and then actually reduces the amount of flow, which then would end up down in that lower area on Southeast 8th. But that was a good question. I'm glad you gave me a chance to clarify.
Thank you.
Good evening and thank you for this meeting. My name is Peggy Nolan and I live at 325 Southeast Third Terrace. I know you're doing these complete studies, but I don't know if anybody really brought it to your attention or if you've noticed. The federal highway has a higher elevation than 8th Avenue. 2nd Avenue has a higher elevation than my street, Southeast Third Terrace. Now my backyard floods, which I don't really care about it. And yes, I do get some flooding in the front, but nothing that has gone to my house. So this whole area sits lower than both the streets, the big streets that are on to the east and west of us. So maybe that's something that I don't know if it's been brought to your attention, but I wanted to make sure that I brought it to your attention.
Yes, that certainly is an issue that we've seen. In fact, if you can look on the map again, with 8th Avenue here, the lighter color is the lower elevation. If you look over at Federal Highway, the darker color is higher. So it's very, quite a bit of elevation. And so that's another challenge that DOT system sits up higher, but your area has to drain through that to get to the outfall. Now, the pipes all generally do flow downhill because they're under the ground, but still there's a tremendous amount of water at a higher elevation that's, driving more head to get out first, right? So that's when we talked about the kind of waiting in line to get a little bit, that there is a challenge there. So yeah, elevation is one of the key aspects of information that we look into when we're doing these computer simulations of the hydraulics and looking at how things work. So I'm glad you brought that up.
But 2nd Avenue also, there's all condos on the east side of the street on 2nd Avenue. My backyard, the rest of the house over there, that their elevation is higher than ours. So it's adding to the water flow that's coming into those, 8th Avenue.
Yeah, and that can be, I can't remember your exact situation, but that can be an issue. Sometimes when development comes in and happens at different times, things are built at a higher or lower elevation. And those are common issues that can happen. And, looking into those and assessing those on a site-by-site basis is part of looking at the solutions.
And it might be interesting to note, just, understanding your flood risk and knowing your flood zone, very important for everybody to understand what their risk is. So today, if you were to build a home today and go through the building department, you would be required to be 1 foot above the 100-year flood elevation, the base flood elevation. Unfortunately.
Hence the house that's there on the corner of Fourth Court that's.
Yeah. Right. So the base flood elevation is 11 feet for that area. So again, knowing your risk and knowing your zone is very important to assess your flood risk. So that's just an item of note. If you are building a brand new home, you're going to build it to a much higher elevation if you were building today. But unfortunately, a lot of our homes weren't built today, right? So we're sitting with a pre-existing condition. And that's why it's so important that we have the flood insurance.
Yeah, like I said. Yes, but Federal Highway, the construction that's gone over there, yes, 10, 20 years is higher. So it's adding. Now there is a retention pond on hill that was supposed to help alleviate some of the water that goes down 8th Avenue. But
Well, another point, and Alec just reminded me, this model that we talked about that we developed for the project, this hydrologic and hydraulic model, we use it as a tool to assess things under the master plan and evaluate things. But the other benefit of it is it's then now a tool moving forward that the city can use to answer questions like what ifs when different development comes in and where possible stresses or reliefs on the stormwater system can be used as well. So part of, it's an investment, for the city as well. Next.
Do we want to, let me take one call from, oh, let's see. Dave, are you on the line?
Hi, can you hear me? It's actually Debbie.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. Thank you for having this. I was really pleased to get the postcard to be made aware of this meeting so we could participate. We are on Southeast 13th Court, which is a major street connecting to Target. And I believe the Target land is the only storm drain that we have access to. So with very minimal rain, we have a lot of flooding on our street. And with the zigzags and the islands that were put in, I think it's made it worse instead of better with the flooding. I've been in Deerfield going on 4 or 5 years now, and I've noticed it getting worse. So that this year I did get flood insurance because I was concerned at the amount of water that is just piling up in the streets with the amount of rain that we're having. Have you looked at this street, or should I start complaining and starting today?
Absolutely. And we're going to take down your information. If you could put your information in the chat box and we'll get back with you.
Okay, great.
There's also a virtual comment card. We're going to put the link in the chat and folks can actually fill out a virtual comment card.
Yeah, and with that information, we can look back, and maybe it's been pointed out by our analysis already that that's a problem area, but even if not for some reason, knowing that's an issue, we can take that input and look into it.
There's somebody else in the audience.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I know we were talking about the Southeast 8th Avenue and the building where we're going from here. I know that you guys are looking at Southeast 8th Avenue, but you have identified the roadway. That's 50% of our problem. The other 50% of our problem is from federal highway. Because there's no drainage between federal highway and 8th Avenue. We have all those builds. You have Dixie Divers all the way down 4th Court is a dead end road. There's no drainage from federal highway all the way. So basically federal highway runs its course past those nice US style houses that are 2 stories on the left, all the way to basically our backyards. And it comes through, there's a wall there, comes through our backyard. So yes, the low area, 8th Avenue is the road, but that's 50% of your problem when you're dealing with the water coming in from the other side. So it's a combination. We're getting it from both areas. And I know we're talking about development. If you look on your map, right where 4th Court comes to 8th Avenue, if you look just east of there, you can see that there's a mobile home park. Well, what's going to happen in the next 10 years with the mobile home park? Development. What's going to happen to that development? It's going to meet this. It's going to meet the flood requirements of Deerfield Beach, and they're going to raise it up 20 feet. What does that do for us? So it's not only following the new code with buildings, it's also taking into account the residents that live there, and how it's going to affect them. I think it's very important. Yes, we're going to follow code from here on out, but what adverse reactions would a build in that area do to our residents that have been here for quite some time, homes in that area? And I know that we were talking about Stormwater Master Plan and runoff, and, all the stuff like that. And our friend, welcome to 8th Avenue, sir. But it's more than just drains and gutters. When you're getting water in your homes, it's more than just neutralizing. Following as much green as I can and make sure I have green space everywhere. Trying to get walk in the water, stuff like that. Move my water, make sure I'm not overwatering my grass. There's a lot to it. So I think that this is good starting, but I think this is something that has to continue. We do this animal because the city got the money now and we get grants for the next 5 years. But if we don't start now, we're gonna look like Fort Lauderdale with sewer problems. Let's get ahead of our stormwater funds now and be prepared for what's coming in 10 years.
Yeah, and I would echo that we consider these plans what we term as a living document, right? It shouldn't be a plan that just goes and once you do everything, then it's done. And then you forget about it. It should be a living document that's built upon every, so many years on a planning period to be able to, address issues and make sure things aren't, forgotten about, and changes in the city and in the development can be, addressed. So appreciate that comment.
All right, I have a Marley.
Hi, this is Marley's husband, Michael, 1248 Southeast 8th Street. And we were curious. We have an asphalt driveway, and our driveway is right next to the drain, so it backs up a lot. Not anywhere near the house, but it's a big pond. And we would like to see part of your study, a residential either tax rebate or some kind of incentive to replace an asphalt driveway with something that's more eco-friendly. We're big proponents of that, so that's it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Yep.
Do you want a microphone? Let Alec catch up with you.
Thank you. If there's any way to incentivize, and I know education is a part of the program that you laid out, but if there's less water draining off of the little green space that we have, if it's more retained, there's going to be, the consequence is going to be less stormwater in the streets. So if there's any way to, I don't know, I guess it would be more of a marketing campaign or something like a social sensitization of the public to like plant more trees, reduce, the fertilizers, and maybe rain barrel collection, something about redirecting the water, off their driveways, just to keep it on their property. More trees, more something that collects it. Composting has been shown, mulching has been shown also to retain a lot more water on property, just so it doesn't just flush out into the street. Anyway, so that's it. I think any incentive would get the people involved basically more, instead of just expecting the institution to do something about it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pipe in here, just give a little bit. So, I've been in Florida most of my life, and, I'm Jeff Marshall. I live on Fifth Avenue on the other side of Hillsborough from you guys. So we get 60 inches of rain a year. This year we've had 26 for the year. So we're short by almost 15, 20 inches so far this year. So it's really been dry. Nobody's seen water if you haven't been here, for a number of years. So all of the things like the retaining water on your property is all really good. Unfortunately, that's all small potatoes. So if we all try and retain as much water as we can on our own property, we're doing really good. The big volume stuff though, like 8th, unfortunately, is the big drain from Federal Highway and Dixie Highway. It's all going to 8th Avenue. And I don't know how you're going to get it fixed without whatever your comprehensive plan to fix it. A percolating pipe that goes down the street may help, but this has been addressed before. This road's been all dug up and it's, there's pipes and, so it's going to take a lot to get 8th Avenue fixed. What I think would be a really big improvement, I don't want to say nationwide, but community-wide or citywide or statewide, might be getting rid of curbing. Curbing is awful. You're channeling it down. I watched them redo Pioneer Park, the boat ramp, and you go over there and you look down. I'm watching the whole thing as they did it because I love the ramp. I live there. I use the boat ramp, and I'm looking at the curbing, and it takes all of the water and it channels it right into the canal. I'm like, I thought we were trying to store the water on land, filter it through the land. So when we're doing all these plans, Amanda Martinez and we were talking about Hillsborough Boulevard when they were redoing it to say, okay, we're going to go from 6 lanes to 4 lanes. And I said, well, why not just put landscaping down the middle, landscaping on the sides, join the bike lane and the sidewalk together. We can still have 6 lanes. This is between Federal and Dixie. I mean, it's a really short stretch. And I said, and swale the water, and in the middle and the side, you probably don't even need irrigation. No, we got to go to 4 lanes, but we're going to put curbs. And now where does the water go? Water's got to go into the storm drain system. I hate to say it. I said, unless that attitude is changed, what are you going to do? I mean, it's everywhere. Everywhere. The planned communities are even worse with all that stuff. Downtown Deerfield, we're not a planned community. This stuff was planned, 50, 60, 70 years ago, and even then it doesn't count, so I have to figure out a way to get rid of the water. But the big problem for 8th Avenue is it's not going to get fixed unless you do something big. So, thank you.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Got a question from Dave.
You want that? I got a question. All right.
Hi, thank you. I'm having a hard time finding the chat box in order to share information with you.
Thank you for bringing that up. I discovered myself that the chat box is not enabled.
Okay.
I was looking for we could share.
I thought I was going crazy.
But what I can tell you is that I will post the presentation and I will post the virtual comment card to our website. So if you will go to the city website and look for the Department of Environmental Services, this workshop, the recording of this workshop, the presentation itself, and our virtual comment card will be available on the website. So I'll ask you to go to that, to drop your comment card if you're virtual. Now tonight, if you're here present, you can drop your comments at the back table because we will be taking comments in the back. But for those who are participating virtually, I'll direct you to the website.
Okay, curiosity question from Sandy Corman, 602 Southeast 8th Avenue. Typical depth groundwater on 8th Avenue and the soil conditions. I mean, is it typically beach sand or what do we have under us there?
My recollection, it's fairly sandy soils, but the water table varies quite a bit. And I would guess it, depending on how much rain there's been, it can vary anywhere from a couple feet below land surface to deeper. And yeah, that would be my. Yeah, I think it's far enough inland that it would be fresh. Yep. Okay.
A couple of years ago, Peggy Nolan again. Several years ago, we had an initiative in the city. If you look at 6th Avenue and all the palm trees that are on 6th Avenue, residents could buy palm trees for $50 and they put them in their front yards. Okay. I mean, if we could start up something like that again, at least it would get more trees or things in the swale areas that might help absorb some of the waters. And another big thing, when we were real big in recycling, we took the recycling programs to the elementary and middle schools. And it's amazing how children will come home and tell their parents, you have to plant a tree here, or they will, you have to recycle these products. So even if you could get things into the schools, maybe they come home and tell their parents work. The parents take them to softball. The parents have soccer with these kids or homework. They don't have the opportunities to come to these meetings. It's great that they have Zoom, but they can't come to the meetings. So a lot of the education is, if you could get coloring books or something to get into these schools to help the children, bring it home to their parents.
Yeah, and I would say that's pretty effective. And again, as we mentioned, some educational programs and ideas to further that are part of the program. And I remember my daughter very times coming home from middle school and high school and, talking about the things they learned in environmental class or those type of things. And when she came back from college, she really let me have it with some of the, the things that they talk about there. So it's definitely, that's a good, starting with you, ingrain it, good principles into the youth. Yeah.
And when we talk about this, when we talk about the Green Swale Initiative, we're really looking to create a depression in that swale, so that section between the front of the sidewalk and that edge of pavement. What we want ideally is a 6-inch depression in that swale, because what you want is to retain the water. A lot of times if you plant trees, what ends up happening is that area gets filled in and it gets mounded. So you no longer have the retention area. So you want to be very careful with the planting of trees in that swale. So, you mentioned the tree initiative. Yes, we definitely want to encourage planting of trees, but we don't want to encourage it in that swale. That swale, you want to keep that as a depressed area to permit the water to be retained and percolate into the groundwater system in that location. So that is one of the initiatives, one of the studies that we're going to be looking at doing citywide, is encouraging better use of those public swales and having that retention in the swale.
Any more Zoom? We good on Zoom? Okay. Well, good. These are great questions. Appreciate the input from folks in Zoom land. Is that the thing? Or, here in here live. So it's good. Good. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you for your presentation. Really, really appreciate it. Please tell your neighbors, again, you've got the comment cards. The more involvement we get from the community, the more, the action is focused on your neighborhood. So I really appreciate you guys coming on out.
Preston Copper, who's asked to speak.
Well, it's too late. We already closed the meeting. Okay, fine. One more.
Preston, are you there?
I am here.
Yeah, you had a question for us.
So I cannot get the Survey Monkey link to work. So I just wanted to double check. Has somebody verified that on your end before they typed it up on the screen?
We are checking on that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is valuable input. Thank you, everyone. And again, it probably won't get posted early tomorrow, but check maybe later in the day tomorrow or on Wednesday. And by that point, we should have the recording and the presentation for your viewing.
It's SurveyMonkey/r/Deerfield SWMP. So just make sure you're also including the R in there.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you all so
Well,
much.
thank you very much for your attendance today.